Well, greetings, roundtable people. David here on the 8th of April. It is pouring down rain outside. We're here in the shop. And so it's a time for the April update for you all. And so I hope that this is going to be helpful and enjoyable for you. A few little things. First of all, a housekeeping matter, and that is our retreat coming up on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, Saturday. At the Greer's Chapel. I'm going to finalize an agenda for this retreat soon. Only just a few of you are coming at this time. If you would like to come, be sure to let me know so we can prepare for you. And we are going to have morning prayer together initially, and then we will spend time discussing Lewis stuff. Probably have a little bit of time for quiet. You can read on your own and that sort of thing. But I think it would also be fun if there's something that you want to bring, that you want to share with us, or some material that you'd like for us to discuss together. One person was talking about printing out some highlights that they had made from one of Lewis's books, and us just kind of jumping from highlight to highlight and just talking about that, which I thought was a pretty good idea. If there's something that you would like to bring, please feel free to do so. But let me know ahead of time so I can be sure to work it in the schedule, because I want to be sure that what we're doing is that we're using our time well. Also, just curious, several years ago, it's Star Wars Day. Okay, so several years ago I did a talk on C.S. Lewis and Star Wars. I don't know who all was there. I can't remember. If you were there, let me know, because I don't want to, because I'm kind of toying around with maybe presenting that paper again, just in case there were some there who would be interested in that, who had not heard it before. But anyhow, that's just a secondary thing. I had no plans for this having being on Saturday, May the 4th. It just happened that way, and I just thought about that. So anyway, throwing that out to you. Also, if you are interested in perhaps being a part of a group of 4 going to the Most Reluctant Convert play, Saturday, April the 27th at 4 p.m. down at Tivoli, let me know, because I do have a friend who's trying to put a foursome together, so you can get a little bit of a discount on the tickets. No news on from Netflix about the Narnia programs. You will have noticed that there is a movie on the life of Tolkien that is coming out, I think maybe even this week. There's been a trailer about that. Everybody's just wondering, what is this going to be like? We shall see. I don't know that it's going to be showing in Chattanooga. I haven't followed up on it because I've been busy keeping up with other things. But you may want to look into that. You can just Google Tolkien movie 2019 or whatever. You should be able to find information on it. However, when it comes to the Netflix thing, when Sheila and I were at the Inklings Fellowship Retreat in Montreat, North Carolina this past weekend, came back yesterday. We learned that in November there's going to be an international convention there of Lewis scholars. Well, actually, they're all Americans. Well, Douglas Gresham's coming over from Malta. Okay, so that makes it international, I suppose. But it is open to anybody in the world coming to Montreat to learn about Lewis. And Douglas being there, he's involved with the Netflix programs. And it is in their printed literature. It does mention his talking about Narnia and Netflix. So we'll see if perhaps, that's a long way away. That's in November. Hopefully we'll have some more news before then, but there might be some revelation at that time. Now, one of the things that I promised was that we would go to this conference at Montreat this past weekend and come back and report to you things that we learned. And as it is, the things that I have to share with you are rather sort of tangential. If you didn't know anything about C.S. Lewis's life, it would have been fascinating, but it was all just hashing a lot of old stuff for us. And I know that a lot of you all know a good bit about Lewis, so I really, Sheila and I are coming back, driving down the highway, thinking, well, what are we going to share? But there were some things there. It was good for us to be there. There were some fun things that happened. First of all, Hal Poe, who was one of the organizers of the event, he's had several books about Lewis published, and I told him about my book, and he's very interested in my book. And he said that he would get me in touch with his publisher and his editor and these sorts of things. So that's kind of nice. That was a good thing that happened there. And then for a long time, my wife has been bugging me about getting in touch with a fellow named Stan Shelley in North Carolina, who is a collector of C.S. Lewis, Inklings books. Reason being that she works with his cousin, and she wanted her, the cousin, to know that her husband had talked with Stan. His name's Stan Shelley. And Stan was there, and he had brought a bunch of books. And he had some real treasures, and it was fun looking through these books. I held at one time a copy of, I think it was the first American edition of Magician's Nephew, something like that, signed by C.S. Lewis, $5,000 book. There was another book that I picked up. By pick up, I mean I picked it up. I didn't buy it. But there was another book that was there that Lewis had just published it, and he was sending it off to somebody. He says, "Here it is," C.S. Lewis. So he had stuff like that, but he had things by lots of different Inklings and a really cool collection of books. But it was nice talking with Stan and getting to know him. And talking with Stan, it got me thinking about the whole world of collecting C.S. Lewis books. And I thought that it would be, it was The Last Battle, not Magician's Nephew, but I'm looking at my notes now. But I wanted to just share with you a few things about the Ed Brown collection, because you probably don't know about that. Ed Brown, who recently passed away, was a Harvard-trained physician who has become known in Lewis circles as the greatest collector of first editions and other works by C.S. Lewis for a private collection. It was a private collection he had. He traveled around, here and abroad to get this collection together. And his whole collection, the books and the letters of C.S. Lewis that he collected, they have all been donated to Taylor University up in Indiana, and it's rather amusing. They've tried to recreate. They've got a C.S. Lewis study center there at Taylor University, and they've tried to recreate a British pub to have there. It's okay, but anyway, Ed wrote a book about his experiences in collecting Lewis material and in pursuit of C.S. Lewis. And the book is really an enjoyable book. You initially read about how he got into collecting Lewis material, and then he has his full notes about his full collection in here, exactly how he knows that he's got the first edition or whatever it is that he had. You might be able to see here how he talks about keys to the edition and special notes he has about the book to demonstrate the fact that it is the authentic book that he's claiming it to be. And this collection was, like I say, was donated to Taylor University. And when I was there a couple of years ago, I was able to look at it, and I was really thankful to be able to do this. He had acquired the letters that C.S. Lewis and Warnie Lewis had written to June Fluitt, who later is known as Lady Jill Freud, one of the World War II evacuees. And while I was there, I was able to read those letters and take notes in those letters, and some of that I wrote down will be incorporated in the book that I'm working on. So that was neat to be able to look at those letters, not just to get emails from Lady Freud, which I have done, but also to look at the letters that Jack and Warnie had written to her. Now, those letters are available in Walter Hooper's collection of letters. just in case you're wondering about that. So they are published there, but the letters themselves are there at Taylor University. Now, at Taylor University, every couple of years they have a C.S. Lewis or Inklings related colloquium. Scholars get together and they have special speakers and papers for several days related to the Inklings. And I went to the one in 2016 and I spoke at it. And as a resource for you, I'm going to provide, there's a lot of links this time around. I'm going to provide a link to the Taylor University C.S. Lewis Center and a place where you can go. You might need to dig around a little bit, but there's a place where you can go and you can look at past years. They've got a collection of downloadable PDF of past years lectures and papers that they think were important, and I'll also have a link to where you can see what I spoke about. I've got a little summary of what the paper was about. Excuse me. And it's very worthwhile going to. It's one of the best things you can do. It's to go to Taylor to one of those colloquiums. They vary in quality from year to year. The one that I was at was just absolutely amazing. They had all kinds of really good scholars there. This last year wasn't so good, and I didn't go. But anyway, you can go and inspect that, and you might find some things that you'd like to read off of that website from Taylor University. But I want to just share with you, since you probably don't have this book, I brought this home from the kilns, that just a few things that Brown has to say about his experience in collecting books and materials by C.S. Lewis. And there's one section in the book where he's talking about wishing that he had been able to meet C.S. Lewis himself. He could have. He lived back in those days. But failing that, people that C.S. Lewis knew that he was able to meet. Excuse me. So I just want to read this short little piece to you for fun. It's called "The Closest Thing to Meeting Lewis Himself." Sadly, my interest in C.S. Lewis came fairly late in life. Prior to 1963, I had read only Perelandra and knew almost nothing about their author. I vividly recall, however, opening the November 1963 issue of Time, which featured the assassination of President Kennedy, and noting on the obituary page a name that caught my eye, Clive Staples Lewis. I couldn't understand why it somehow seemed familiar, but as I continued to stare at it, suddenly the light broke through. Clive Staples Lewis, good grief, that's C.S. Lewis. And at that moment I felt a tinge of remorse that I'd never had the privilege of meeting the man. Years later, as I became more familiar with his work, I had a longing to meet those who knew the man behind the words. And as fate would have it, I could not have done better than to have Walter Hooper become the first of these. As noted earlier, this good fortune was a result of learning from Mr. Reading, landlord of the Eagle and Child, that the original pub sign had been given to Walter Hooper when the Ind Coop Brewery refurbished the Bird and Baby some years earlier. Now, if you don't know, there is, there's another story about this that I happen to know. At the kilns, there's the sign is there. Walter Hooper donated it to the kilns, and I've provided a picture of it hanging up on the wall in the library at the kilns on your Patreon page there, where we have our Patreon group, and you'll notice that at the bottom of the painting it says Ind Coop, and Ind Coop was the brewery that owned the Eagle and Child. And the story that I heard was not that the sign had been given. Well, okay, think of it this way. It says that the sign had been given to Walter Hooper, but Walter Hooper had found it in the rubbish bin. They were throwing it away, and he got it out, and he asked if he could have it, and then the owner says, "Yeah, you could." So that's what happened. It wasn't like they looked up Walter Hooper and said, "This would be something Walter would like to have." It didn't happen. Walter Hooper first became aware of C.S. Lewis when he read Lewis's preface to J.B. Phillips' Letters to Young Churches in 1953 as an undergraduate at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. In fact, I've got one of those right over here. You may have read this yourself, Letters to Young Churches by J.B. Phillips. I've had a hardback copy of this. In fact, I think it was a first edition. Let me look at this one too. This is a 17th printing, copyright 1947. This is 1953, but I think I might have an earlier edition back in the house. I found this at the Friends of the Library book sale out at Eastgate this last time around. So I got it for next to nothing. And it has an introduction by C.S. Lewis in it, which is one of the, I mean, it's a great translation, but it's also worthwhile having so that you can have the introduction by C.S. Lewis from the book. But Walter Hooper apparently found out about C.S. Lewis from this book. And it says, drafted into the army soon thereafter, he came across a copy of Miracles, which he kept beneath his shirt during the whole of his basic training, for reading during short breaks from firing the bazooka, crawling under barbed wire, and peeling potatoes while on KP. Walter says, I went to that book as a man in the desert might go to a well. In 1954, as a chaplain's assistant at Fort Bragg, and after reading whatever of Lewis he could get his hands on, Walter wrote to Lewis to thank him for what he had received from his writings, never imagining that he would receive a reply. But Lewis did reply, and Walter became known among the chaplains as, oh, he's the soldier who heard from C.S. Lewis. Less than 10 years later, he had the opportunity to meet Lewis in Oxford as described elsewhere. Now, 2 years later, again in Oxford, I phoned Walter, and this would be 1965. I phoned Walter to see if he might have time for us to get together. He graciously invited me to meet him at the Randolph Hotel that afternoon for their regular high tea, apologizing, however, that he had to keep an engagement soon thereafter, so he would be able to spare only 20 minutes or so. Early in the conversation, he noted that he had recently been in America for a tour with the C.S. Lewis film Through Joy and Beyond. Now, I ought to have that book with me. I don't. It's over in the house. I've got the book that went along with the movie, and if you haven't seen Through Joy and Beyond that Walter Hooper narrates, it's excellent. He then told of a particular unpleasant experience in Los Angeles when the religion editor of the Los Angeles Times questioned him at length about allegations that certain Lewis documents had possibly been forged by someone, and that's probably a reference to the accusation that Walter Hooper himself had forged the Dark Tower, which is ridiculous. When the interviewer became particularly obnoxious, Walter rose and politely told him that the interview was over because he had other commitments to keep. Although the interviewer rose as if to leave, he continued his questioning. Also present was a young man who had been giving his time to Walter, driving him wherever he needed to go in Los Angeles. This friend, a former college football player, eased up to the visitor and chest to chest nudged him toward the door with the parting words, Father Hooper says the interview is over. When I asked Walter who the young man was, I was pleased to learn that it was my own new friend, Jerry Root, then a youth pastor at a church in the Los Angeles area. Of course, Root's known as I think he's up at Wheaton now. He's a well-known scholar. I had become acquainted with Jerry through an advertisement of a Los Angeles bookseller in a magazine for book collectors and booksellers, the erstwhile A.B. Weekly, now defunct with the advent of the internet-based book exchange Abe Books. And the ad said this, wanted first editions of C.S. Lewis. And the ad caught my eye because I had been contemplating submitting the same ad, and I was disturbed that someone had beat me to it. So phoning the bookseller, I learned that he had submitted it on behalf of a customer who wanted to amass, quote, the best C.S. Lewis collection on the West Coast, unquote. He kindly offered to pass my name and phone number to this customer, and thus began a long friendship with one of the great C.S. Lewis scholars now on the faculty of Wheaton College, and that's Jerry Root. So they both were trying to collect Lewis books and found each other that way. He says, Jerry indeed had been a football player, and while on leave in Oxford in 1985, I learned that he also was in Oxford for a time, where in his spare time he was coaching a semi-professional Oxford football team. Well, I'm going to skip all of that. Well, anyway, he goes back to his tea with Walter, and it says, the minutes passed rapidly as he expanded on the story of that American tour, and 4 hours later glanced at his watch in alarm, remembering that he had not only missed his late afternoon appointment, but was to have joined a friend for dinner an hour earlier. Well, there it goes. But let's see here. He says, Walter and I still have a chat whenever I visit Oxford, and whenever I have a question about some aspect of Louisiana, I ring him up or email him. So at any rate, let's see here. Yeah, I think that's about all he's got there about Walter. So, he tells stories about people that he meets and all. And then there's one other one I wanted to share with you that I thought was kind of fun, and that is the story of how he came across. He's trying to collect first British editions of the Chronicles of Narnia. He wants a whole set of them. And he says that, he talks about how he got one of those. I need to get a drink of water. Here's my water right here. Excuse me just a second. Okay, here we go. Early in 2005, a bookseller in Edinburgh offered me a first edition of Prince Caspian inscribed on the title page, "To Penelope with Love" from C.S. Lewis. Oh yeah, he wants them to be signed too. Her bookplate showed her to be Penny Berners-Price, and since it was apparent from the inscription that she was more than a casual contact, I again searched and sourced all the information I could, trying to find out who she was. And of the many websites turned up, one seemed most promising, an address of a professor of chemistry at an Australian university. I wrote to Professor Berners-Price to tell her of my acquisition and to ask if by some unlikely circumstance she might know anything about Penelope Berners-Price, and she replied, but Penelope, and indeed she did reply, not only is she the goddaughter of Penelope, she replied, but Penelope was still alive and well, living in Scotland. And in response to a phone call to her immediately upon receiving my email, she said that Penelope would very much like to hear from me. Sue also told me the fascinating story of how Penelope's parents became acquainted with C.S. Lewis and later enjoyed a lasting friendship with him. So he's tracked down the Penelope to whom Lewis inscribed the book, and he finds out that the reason that she knew Lewis was because her parents were friends of Lewis, and here's how they became friends. A woman who said that she was the wife of C.S. Lewis had been living at the Court Stairs Hotel near Ramsgate that was owned by Alan and Nell Berners-Price, parents of Penny. Her husband, she had assured them, would pay the bill as soon as he arrived. After many weeks, during which she told them he had been delayed for one reason or another, Nell went to Oxford and presented C.S. Lewis with a stack of unpaid bills, asking him when he was going to take care of the matter. "But I'm not married," he replied, much to her surprise. Returning to the hotel, she had the woman arrested, and Lewis served as a witness at her trial. It turned out that her name was Mrs. Hooker, and she had been in jail several times for the same offense. Some months after acquiring this treasure, this book, he says, while visiting a new friend in London who wanted me to see his C.S. Lewis collection, I was surprised to see Penny's same book plate, because Penny had a book plate that she put in the book. Now this was her book plate right there. And he found another of the books from the Narnia Chronicles with her book plate in it. And it was the first edition of Horace and His Boy. So he had Prince Caspian, now he's got Horace and His Boy, with her childish inscription above it, "Given to me by Daddy in 1955, Penelope Berners-Price, 10 years old." He told me he had also owned a first edition of The Silver Chair with the same book plate the bookseller did, which he had sold to a mutual friend of ours. When I later contacted that friend upon my return home, I learned he had 3 of her books. Well, as he goes on to tell, he had collected the whole set of the original Chronicles of Narnia that originally belonged to Penelope, but he still lacked the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And so you'll see up here at the top, he says, if anybody knows where, if you see this book plate and you know where it might be, here's my email address. Well, at any rate, enough of that. It's a worthwhile book to read, just for the fun stories, and especially if you just like books as well. Now then, let's go back to this retreat. What we did on Friday night was, just after a little get-together, we watched the documentary, The Magic Never Ends. Now, I own a copy of that. I'm pretty sure that I showed it to the society, I think probably when we were meeting across the street from the old camp house on William Street downtown. And so we watched The Magic Never Ends and discussed it a little bit. And of course, here I am again. I'm watching a DVD that I already own. And so anyhow, it's really a nice documentary. And today, while I was preparing to share some things with you, I went on YouTube just to see, do they have Magic Never Ends on there? And they do. And in fact, you can also, if you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can watch it for free as an Amazon Prime free video. And of course, I'll provide the link for YouTube, and then I have also posted it on my blog. So you get all kinds of ways of seeing The Magic Never Ends. It's a lovely little documentary. I'm playing the music to it in the background here because I also got the DVD music because it was nice. But here's the thing. In the process of looking that up for you, I came across a 4-part documentary on the life of C.S. Lewis that I didn't know existed. It was produced in 2005 by RBC Ministries, which is the same people that do the Our Daily Bread devotional, which you've probably seen before. And it's a narrated story of Lewis's life with people that were concerned with Lewis's life, or with C.S. Lewis scholars being interviewed. The narrator is Os Guinness, and Os Guinness is the well-known Christian apologist who is indeed related to the Guinness family of Ireland. He narrates the thing, and when I first listened to it, I was thinking, I know that voice. Who is that? I'll supply a link for you to see if you're interested in knowing who Os Guinness is. But it was shown on apparently a documentary program series called Day of Discovery, and like I said, it's in 4 parts. And I've got links to each of the parts that are on YouTube for you with this video once I get it put up. Of interest, they happened to interview a very young-looking Michael Ward in there. This was back in 2005. He was still the chaplain at Peterhouse College, and it was that same year that my wife and I first met Michael Ward, and he told us about how he had discovered the Narnian planet scheme and was going to have to totally start his PhD dissertation all over again. And towards the end of the last one, they also have a very brief interview with Lady Jill Freud, who is that London evacuee that I mentioned earlier, how I read her letters at Taylor University. She's on that video there. So and it was a surprise. I didn't know that. I've run across other stuff that she's done, but that was there. So I've got these videos for you to watch. So you've got, if you've not seen this either, you've got a lot of catching up to do. We both do, because I watched some of this Life of Lewis video, but I haven't watched hardly near of all that needs to be watched. So I've got links, as I said, so that you can enjoy these things. Well, I think that right now, which we've come on getting on close to 30 minutes, I think that that's all that I've got to share with you this time around. And so I'm apologize about the retreat. I was all excited about coming back and giving you all these insights these scholars had and stuff, and it just didn't happen. But it has led me to sharing Ed Brown's collection with you, and Taylor University with you, where his collection is held, and also some videos as well. I'm just looking at my notes, see if there's anything else I need to cover. I don't think so. I hope you can come to our retreat. Again, do let me know, and if there's anything you think you might want us to talk about, whatever if it's questions you got, or if it's something that you enjoy, you just want to chat about, just let me know, and we'll see what we can pull off. Now, if anything else comes up this month that is of interest to you, I'll be sure to pass it on. But in the meantime, oh yes, I am still working on my book. I've got a lot of it done, really. I'm spending a lot of time now being sure that I can trace back work, because a lot of this stuff I've written from memory, and I'm trying to be sure to go back and fact check that I am remembering it well, and then being sure that I'm saying everything that I want to say. And so once I get this thing written, then I'll probably send it off to an editor, and then we'll start sending it off to my different contacts in the C.S. Lewis world, and let these people have a look at it and see what they might say about it. And then we'll see if Harry Poe can help me get it published. If not, I'll publish it myself. But it's a coming. So I just appreciate your prayers about that. Okay, well, I'll let you go. You have a good rest of the month, and hope to see you on Star Wars Day. Bye.